according to whatever they agreed to in the contract. And it's a good world, honey.
Right.
It's a good. I've been all over the world. I mean, 16 round trips, 32 crossings of the North Atlantic at the height of World War II. I've been in a lot of countries. There's nothing like the good old USA.
Right, even as much as some people complain about.
That's right, right. We got a lot of faults, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there isn't. We have a lot, but hey, a person has a right to speak their mind.
Sure.
There's,
right.
it's not a communist country. It's a good old USA.
Right.
I know no better way of putting it than that. And,
how did the labor unions fare, like, during the Red Scares with the communists? Like, did it hurt the unions?
It probably did. It probably did. That I couldn't truthfully answer. I would say yes. I could truthfully answer. Definitely until democracy prevailed with them, and there used to be murders, and my cousin wrote a book. Harry Cadell from Whitesburg, Kentucky. He wrote a book, Night Comes to the Cumberland. It's about the coal mines in them days down in the Appalachia, Kentucky, which was poor. We were so poor, believe me, but he wrote a book about it. It's very interesting, and I have a book here. If you want to, I'm going to loan it to you and Mr. Parton. Okay? Now, this is the third or fourth edition of this I had. This book is, I went to Pitt College, P-I-T, meaning coal mine. Okay? And it's written by Laureen Gilfillan. She was a writer, newspaper writer in New York City back in 1930 and 31. She came out here and she lived she calls it Avlonia, but that is Avella, Pennsylvania. She came here and lived with them just as a person, not as a writer, you know. But at night she'd be sitting by an oil lamp and typing up her stories, and she wrote this book. It's very, and they mention Cannonsburg in it. They mention Cedar Grove. They mention Cross Creek in it, towns right around here. Begging on the streets down in Cannonsburg in 1931. She tells all about it here, and if you would be interested in reading it, I'd certainly let you have it for as long as it takes.
Sure.
Pat Fagan. Have you heard the name Fagans? Sure you have. Down Bridgeville.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay. Pat Fagan was president, that's old Pat Fagan, was president of the District 5 of the United Mine Workers here in this area. John Buzzarella came after him, and John Buzzarella lived right down in Oakdale. But in here, they talk about, let's see, someplace in here about hanging Pat Fagan to a sour apple tree. I mean, they name them. They were people that was communist people that had. No, I shouldn't. Oh, to hell with communism! There are a lot of stupid remarks. Real miners aren't communists. The communists have been in Avlonia, which is Avella, and they always will be. They just make a lot of noise. Which?
Who is complaining?
Pardon?
Who is complaining? Who is that? Talking against
it's a group. You're a unit organizer and a treasurer. Let's see. It says Jim Snyder. I don't like that name. Doesn't ring a bell with me. And here it says he had found a typewritten story of the crusade to Pittsburgh with accompanying communist songs. notes on the trial at Washington. So evidently there was a trial there. It's been now. This is mentions in Kentucky. In Kentucky, they'd shoot him for less than that. I know who started talking. It was this Casey, dirty double crosser. See, that's. That was the biggest drawback for the unions. Was the communists in them days,
Right.
back in the early 30s. But this book you'll pick up a lot of names, towns and people around here that their families are still here.
Oh.
So I'm gonna leave this with you, and you can let Mr. Parton read it,
Okay.
because after all, he is history, and
Right.
I'm sure, like I say, this is probably the third or fourth edition of this book that I bought. I got this one out at Barnes and Noble because I'd loaned them to the coal miners, and probably half of them couldn't read, but they took the book. No, I don't mean that.
I know.
I wouldn't trade the decade of the 30s, as tough as it was. I wouldn't want
Right.
my kids, I wouldn't want my son, who graduated from South Fayette High School here too in 1964. I wouldn't want John to go through a decade like the 30s. But I wouldn't trade the 30s, or my grandchildren.
Oh.
And I got two grandchildren, in Zachary and Christian, right here in South Fayette School now. And I had two that graduated from South Fayette. I wouldn't want them to go through it, but I wouldn't trade the
Right.
decade of the 30s for any decade in my life. And I've lived in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and now 90s. Now I'm going into the millennium.
Why is that? Just because of what you learned that year?
Yeah. It taught me to appreciate people. And
Right. I guess it probably taught you what you can do without.
right, absolutely. And it gives you the feeling of wanting to help people, and I've tried to help people my whole life. Anybody that knows me, they will tell you, hey, call John Levis. Say, I get more telephone calls, and I don't live in South Fayette anymore. But oh yeah. Again, I say it's with all our faults, we got the best kids in the world too. We have. I say that in all sincerity. Hey, it'll be a good country yet, as long as with what's coming up, you kids.
Thanks.
I say that from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't think so.
Maybe I took your questions away from you.
Hey, I didn't need to
Excuse
ask
me.
any.
I'm sorry if I.
No.
I'll tell you a little story here.
Sure.
A little girl from Upper St. Clair interviewed me last year for World War II, my experiences in World War II, and here's her report. She got an extra. Kusanich is her name, and then here's a newspaper clipping, which not a clipping, a newspaper, which I'm going to give to Mr. Parton too. The date of this newspaper is December the 8th, 1941.
Oh, so you have.
This
one
is
of
an
those?
original paper from now. Now this paper is 58 years old. Right here. But, if he wants it, I'll certainly
Yes, I'm sure he'll be interested
give
in that.
give it to him. Now when the war came along, that changed. Now John L. Lewis, who was president of the United Mine Workers for a good many